For centuries, humans have created systems to store and transmit information. Languages, codes, symbols, all designed with one purpose: to be understood. But what happens when we encounter something that looks like a language, behaves like a language, yet cannot be understood at all? This is the case of the Voynich Manuscript, a handwritten book carbon-dated to the early 15th century, filled with illustrations and text written in an unknown script. Despite more than 100 years of study, no one has been able to conclusively determine what it says or even what language it represents. And unlike many historical mysteries, the Voynich Manuscript is not lacking in data. We have the book, we have the text, we have the patterns. What we don't have is understanding. The manuscript was brought to public attention in 1912 by a Polish book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich. He acquired it from a Jesuit college in Italy along with several other historical documents. At the time, there was little reason to believe this particular book would be any different. But once scholars began examining it, a problem became immediately apparent. The text could not be read, not because it was damaged, not because it was incomplete, but because it didn't match any known writing system. The manuscript is written left to right with consistent spacing between words. The characters are fluid and uniform, suggesting that the author was not improvising, but rather writing in a system they were already familiar with. And this is where things become interesting. Because when researchers analyzed the text statistically, they found something unexpected. The Voynich script follows patterns similar to natural languages. Some words appear frequently, while others are rare. Certain symbols tend to appear at the beginning of words, while others cluster at the end. The distribution of word lengths is also consistent with real linguistic systems. In other words, the text behaves as if it contains meaningful information, but no one knows what that information is. The illustrations add another layer to the mystery. The manuscript is divided into several sections, each with its own distinct style of imagery. The largest section appears to be botanical, featuring drawings of plants. However, none of these plants have been conclusively identified. Some appear loosely based on real species, but they often combine features that do not naturally occur together. A root system from one plant may be attached to the stem of another with leaves that belong to neither. This has led some researchers to speculate that the illustrations may not be intended as realistic depictions, but rather symbolic representations. But of what remains unclear. Another section of the manuscript contains circular diagrams, often referred to as astronomical or astrological. These diagrams include repeating patterns, radial structures, and occasionally symbols that resemble stars or celestial objects. However, none of these diagrams match known astronomical models from the medieval period. They appear structured, even systematic, but their exact meaning is unknown. Perhaps the most unusual section is what researchers sometimes call the biological or balneological section. It contains numerous drawings of human figures, primarily women, interacting with what appear to be interconnected pools or tubes. These images have been interpreted in various ways. Some believe they may represent early medical concepts, possibly related to the human body or reproductive systems. Others suggest they could be symbolic or allegorical. But again, without a translation of the text, these interpretations remain speculative. Over the years, many attempts have been made to decode the manuscript. Early efforts focused on classical cryptographic techniques, treating the text as a cipher. During both World War I and World War II, experienced codebreakers analyzed the manuscript, applying methods that had proven successful against encrypted military communications. None of these efforts produced a definitive result. More recently, computational approaches have been used. Researchers have applied machine learning, pattern recognition, and statistical analysis in an attempt to identify underlying structures or connections to known languages. Some studies have suggested similarities to certain linguistic families. Others have proposed partial translations. However, none of these claims have been widely accepted. The manuscript remains undeciphered. Given this, several main theories have emerged. The first is that the Voynich manuscript is a hoax. According to this idea, the text is meaningless, intentionally designed to appear complex and valuable. While this may seem plausible at first, it raises several issues. Creating a text that mimics the statistical properties of real language is not trivial. Doing so consistently over hundreds of pages without modern tools would require a significant amount of effort and planning. Additionally, the manuscript shows no obvious signs of correction or hesitation, which suggests the author was not randomly generating symbols but writing with intention. The second theory is that the manuscript is written in code. In this scenario, the text represents a real message encrypted using a system that has yet to be discovered. This would explain the structured nature of the text. However, it also raises a problem. Most ciphers, even complex ones, can eventually be broken given enough time and data. The Voynich Manuscript has both, and yet no successful decryption has been confirmed. This has led some to suggest that if it is a code, the key may have been lost, or the method used may be fundamentally different from known cryptographic systems. The third theory is that the manuscript represents a constructed or unknown language. Rather than encoding an existing language, the author may have created an entirely new one, complete with its own rules and structure. If this is the case, the difficulty in decoding it becomes easier to understand. Without a reference point, even a perfectly logical language can be impossible to interpret. Scientific analysis has at least confirmed the manuscript's age. Carbon dating places the parchment in the early 1400s, and the materials used are consistent with that time period. This strongly suggests that the manuscript is authentic and not a modern fabrication, which means that whoever created it lived more than 600 years ago, and whatever they intended to communicate has remained hidden ever since. Today, the Voynich manuscript is preserved and studied, but still not understood. It continues to attract attention from researchers, linguists, and enthusiasts around the world. Each new attempt at decoding it brings new ideas, new methods, and occasionally new claims. But so far, none have provided a definitive answer. In many ways, the Voynich manuscript represents a unique kind of mystery. It is not hidden. It is not incomplete. It is not destroyed. It is fully available for study, and yet it remains unreadable. So the question is not just what the manuscript says, but whether it can be understood at all. Because if it can't, then it challenges a fundamental assumption, that with enough time and effort, any problem can be solved. The Voynich manuscript suggests otherwise. It suggests that some systems may exist beyond our ability to interpret them, not because they are complex, but because we lack the context required to understand them. And until that context is found, the manuscript will remain exactly what it has always been, a complete text, with no meaning we can access. So after more than a century of study, we are left with the same questions. What is it? Who wrote it? And why? And perhaps the most important question of all, if the answer has survived for 600 years, why hasn't it revealed itself yet?